Hello and welcome to this video on the DNA technology used in both Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. Both of these movies and the series that sprung from them claim to have had their beginnings in DNA extracted from mosquitoes embedded in amber. This premise is fundamentally flawed for a number of reasons. The first, and perhaps simplest, is that DNA does not survive for that long. The amount that can be extracted, even by the relative standards given in the movies, is minuscule. Secondary to that, and perhaps more pressing, is that the DNA extracted is going to either be that of a mosquito, or likely that of a plant in the form of pollen, but they are not going to get DNA from a dinosaur. This is perhaps recognized most effectively in the recent games come out, in which you extract fossils and then from the fossils you get DNA. Unfortunately, there have been attempts to do this over the last few years, and these have all failed. The current belief is that DNA has a rough half-life of 500 years. That means every 500 years, the amount of DNA that can be extracted from the bones is halved. DNA does not undergo the same process of fossilization as a bone does. Bones fossilize by replacing the organic content with minerals. DNA cannot have the organic content replaced with minerals and therefore breaks down. This overall leads to a very simple conclusion. There is no way to create a dinosaur based on the available information in the form of fossilized remains.
Why don't you all sit down? Donald, sit down. Right, here he comes. Oh, well, here I come. Yes.
Hello. Hello.
Say hello.
Hello.
Hello, John.
Oh, yes. I've got lines here.
Well, fine, I guess. But how did I get here?
Well, let me show you. First, I'll need a drop of blood. Your blood.
Right. Oh, John, that hurt.
Relax, John. It's all part of the miracle of cloning.
Hello, John. Hello, John. Hello.
Hello, John. And from what?
Hello, John.
Blood extraction has never recreated an intact DNA strand.
Not without master sequence gaps.
Good afternoon,
Alien
John.
DNA from what source? Where do you get 100 million year old dinosaur blood?
Shh.
What? Oh, Mr. DNA, where did you come from? From your blood. Just one drop of your blood contains billions of strands of DNA, the building blocks of life. A DNA strand, like me, is a blueprint for building a living thing. And sometimes animals that went extinct millions of years ago, like dinosaurs, left their blueprints behind for us to find. We just had to know where to look. 100 million years ago, there were mosquitoes, just like today. And just like today, they fed on the blood of animals, even dinosaurs. Sometimes, after biting a dinosaur, the mosquito would land on the branch of a tree and get stuck in the sap. After a long time, the tree sap would get hard and become fossilized, just like a dinosaur bone, preserving the mosquito inside. This fossilized tree sap, which we call amber, waited for millions of years with the mosquito inside, until Jurassic Park scientists came along. Using sophisticated techniques, they extract the preserved blood from the mosquito and, bingo, dino DNA. A full DNA strand contains 3 billion genetic codes. If we looked at screens like these once a second for 8 hours a day, it'd take 2 years to look at the entire DNA strand. It's that long. So, it's full of holes. Now that's where our geneticists take over. Thinking machine supercomputers and gene sequencers break down the strand in minutes. And virtual reality displays show our geneticists the gaps in the DNA sequence. We used the complete DNA of a frog to fill in the holes and complete the code. Whew. And now we can make a baby dinosaur.
This score is only temporary. It all has very dramatic music, of course. Boom, boom, boom. A march or something hasn't been written yet. And then, of course, the tour moves on.
This, of course, leads to their next creative solution.
You know that I'm not at liberty to reveal the asset's genetic makeup. Modified animals are known to be unpredictable.
Just kill people, Henry.
That's unfortunate.
What purpose could we have for a dinosaur that can camouflage?
Cuttlefish genes were added to help her withstand an accelerated growth rate. Cuttlefish have chromatophores that allow the skin to change color.
It hid from thermal technology.
Really?
How is that possible?
Tree frogs can modulate their infrared output. We use strands from their DNA to adapt her to a tropical climate, but I never imagined...
Who authorized you to do this?
The fundamental basis is that they have the ability to take a large number of DNA samples, analyze them, and then find gaps. Of course, the movie ignores one fundamental problem. The pieces of DNA they do recover are rather like the pieces of a broken piece of ceramic. The ceramic pieces are scattered, and you don't know exactly how they go back together. You can try and put them back together, and find that some are not there, and in other cases you may be able to put it back together, and it will look correct, but it will not be correct. And that is exactly the fundamental problem with the premise they use. They claim that they take the DNA, analyze it through some high-capacity technology that is very efficient, and identifies this gap. They can then take DNA from another organism and recombine the two. Using frog DNA as claimed is a ridiculous idea from the 90s, before the full limitations of genetic research were properly known. But even at that point in time, there was an understanding that you cannot take genes from one species and simply put them into another. There is a compatibility problem. To use an analogy of a vehicle, taking fuses from one car and trying to put them in another. Some may work, some may not. But if you try and change them over randomly, chances are it will simply fail. And the same is true for genes. You cannot bridge gaps in a gene sequence by taking them from one species and simply putting them into another. They will not yield products such as proteins or more complex structures that function correctly. You can see that with research animals. It takes a lot of time and effort to figure out how to put a human gene into a mouse, and a mouse is a lot closer to a human than a frog is to a dinosaur. The movies only get worse over time in this respect. When you look at the more recent Jurassic World, they attempt to make some kind of disturbed argument that you can hybridize dinosaurs above and beyond what has been shown in the original movie. By using one species of dinosaur and taking genetic aspects, they are more or less claiming that you can alter the behavior of the dinosaur. Now, this is only true to a certain extent. Research in humans has shown that some genes lead different people to be more aggressive. There's one that is colloquially known as the warrior gene, and that the more that is active and expressed, the more likely you are to be aggressive and take risks. This is an inherited gene, and certainly not one that can be transferred laterally. An attempt to do so would be much like the very recent case in China, where the researcher attempted to genetically modify embryos so that they could be born HIV resistant. As has been shown from examining his research and published results, that simply does not function. Yet Jurassic World appears to claim to have created viable dinosaurs that will grow to adulthood without any significant drawbacks, despite massive reshuffling of their genome. Additional changes above and beyond simply functional genes, but to incorporate new genes entirely. The best example of this are the chromatophores from a cuttlefish. They are part of a larger, more complex system of regulation and activation. Simply inserting the gene itself will not be enough. They then add in further nonsense. But for the purposes of this video, simply seeing that they add random genes and then they somehow function not only flies in the face of simple science, but it completely disregards the fundamentals of genetics. Thankfully, they have plot armor. Now, there are means of getting a dinosaur, just nothing like what we've seen so far. There is a TED Talk by Jack Horner where he explains that you can in fact begin creating a dinosaur, not by building forwards in time, but by going backwards in time, taking a modern chicken and making modifications to their genome. This all culminates in the chickenosaur. In summary, the biggest problem with Jurassic Park and Jurassic World to an extent is they're attempting to create a patchwork solution, a mosaic of different genes from different species, on the premise that they are more or less interchangeable. Further to that, the latter movies claim that genes are in isolation, that they have no association with anything else. The truth is far from that. Many, if not all, of the genes that are discussed are pleiotropic. This means that they code for a number of different characteristics. You cannot just take them from one species. This is a case of taking a gene from one species and ramming it into the genome of another, much like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. It will work, but it needs quite a bit of effort. This problem is best represented by the effort at resurrecting the woolly mammoth. Despite being reasonably closely related to the elephant, and having most of the genome, it is not an easy thing to resurrect, and that is several millennia, if not hundreds of millennia, younger than dinosaur fossils are. With so much difficulty doing that, and so much difficulty trying to backwards engineer a chicken, despite our knowledge of the genome, the whole concept of Jurassic Park and the latter Jurassic World is simply nonsense. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.